I was actually this close to just getting up and leaving the theater about halfway through this movie. If it wasn't for my friend who was there watching it with me, if I was all alone, I actually would have gotten up and just left that theater. This movie was probably the biggest waste of time this year. I mean, the movie was so bad, I wrote down some notes just because of how bad I thought this movie was. And the thing is, I don't like talking negatively about movies. I like to talk about what I think is good about a movie. But there's nothing in this movie that is worth talking about. Nothing good worth talking about. Yeah, this movie was no bueno. This movie was not good. Let's talk about Hurry Up Tomorrow. So Hurry Up Tomorrow is the Weeknd's new movie, which is based on his latest album, which is based on this movie. So they're kind of based on each other. Yeah. So the movie stars The Weeknd playing The Weeknd as The Weeknd, and Jenna Ortega for some reason. I don't know why, but she's here too. Man, Jenna Ortega, I feel bad for her, but we'll get into that later. The basic plot of the story is that The Weeknd is obviously a superstar, and he is dealing with the not loss, but I guess the breakup between a some woman that we actually don't even see or we don't even know. We have no idea why or how they broke up, but all we know is that The Weeknd is just distraught over this breakup. And so we see him filled with like anxiety and this sort of sorrowfulness as he performs on his tour. And Jenna Ortega here too for some reason. So before I get into my thoughts, I just want to preface that I myself am not a Weeknd fan. Not to say that I don't dislike his music. Actually, his last album that he just dropped back in January, Hurry Up Tomorrow, the album this is based on, I actually quite enjoyed. I liked his music. But like I said, I don't go out of I don't go out of my way to go listen to his music. I'm not a fan. I don't consider myself a fan, but I don't dislike any of his work as a musician. Talking about Hurry Up Tomorrow, I actually listened to the album again this morning. Well, not this morning, but last morning when I watched the movie. Right before I watched it because I just wanted to prepare myself for what I was about to get into, just to immerse myself more into what I was about to experience. So like I said, in terms of The Weeknd and his sort of universe that he sets up, I consider myself an outsider looking in because I'm not a fan. Like the closest I've gotten to experience like a Weeknd experience was his house at Halloween Horror Nights Universal Studios, which was quite interesting to say the least. So I actually wanted, before I even get into this review, I want to talk about this movie and I want to compare it to my experience with another movie that might get the same reaction between critics and audiences, sort of like a parallel between the two, and that is Five Nights at Freddy's. When I compare this movie to Five Nights at Freddy's, well, with The Weeknd, I'm not a fan. With Five Nights at Freddy's, I kind of feel like the opposite, where the movie was sort of made for me, unlike this movie, Hurry Up Tomorrow. So Five Nights at Freddy's for me was an IP that I basically grew up with. I mean, watching Markiplier's original playthroughs and compilations of the first original Five Nights at Freddy's games. I mean, it was just a part of my childhood. So naturally, I was going to have sort of an excitement and sort of an interest and sort of an appreciation for the Five Nights at Freddy's movie that came out in 2023. When I compared Hurry Up Tomorrow with Five Nights at Freddy's, I kind of expected the same reaction to where it's sort of geared towards fans. Basically just a love letter to the fans. And so anybody else who's not really a fan of the work or a film critic who's looking for a good movie, they might not appreciate it. And so they might just, pass this movie off as just kind of bad. That's what I was expecting with this movie, Hurry Up Tomorrow. The only problem being is I don't know who this movie was for, because this movie was absolutely terrible. This was just not a good movie in any sense of the words. If you're a Weeknd fan, maybe you will find something worth in this movie, but I just didn't see it, me personally. Even as somebody, like I said, I don't dislike any of the Weeknd's music. I'm not a Weeknd hater, but I don't see anything redeeming about this movie. This movie was just a waste of time. I mean, it was only about an hour 45 minutes, but it felt like 3 hours. This movie was just such a drag to get through. Yeah, this movie just has nothing to offer. I feel like The Weeknd needs to just give up on making film and TV because he's currently 0 for 2. First with The Idol and now this. My gosh, the acting. We'll get to that later. That was something. Okay, I know I've been talking a lot about the movie without actually getting into the movie. So I kind of want to get into the pros of this movie first before I get into the rest of the movie and what are my thoughts about it. Okay, so here are my positive thoughts. I think there's some sort of merit to be had here and some sort of level of respect I have to give The Weeknd for having an artistic vision and executing on that vision. As an artist, you have to respect somebody having this creative idea and then having the, not just the drive and the energy, but also like the willingness to make that idea come to life. There's some sort of respect there to be had about as just from an artist's viewpoint. That being said, that doesn't make the artistic decision good. I mean, when looking at this movie, even though you have some sort of vision that you have, that doesn't make that a good vision. This movie was just, there was nothing here. And like I said, I don't really like trashing on movies, but there is nothing here. There was clearly some sort of idea that The Weeknd was going for. Even if the idea was good, which I don't think it even was that good of an idea in the first place, the execution on it was so bad, it just fell flat completely and then rolled over into a pile of dog shit. And then that dog shit started lighting on fire. Which is kind of funny considering the ending of this movie, but that was completely unrelated. This movie tries to be artsy and tries to be sort of thought-provoking. There's a lot of camera work where it kind of presents itself as like this really deep and artistic-looking movie. No matter how good the shot might look, it was not enough to save this movie because you can't cover up a shell of a movie with just a few good camera movements. Getting further into that, in fact, there's actually some moments of this movie where it just looks like a complete doo-doo. I want to say about like 10% of this movie is just the camera spinning around The Weeknd. I get the fact that it's supposed to be, supposed to represent him being disoriented as he has to deal with like the anxiety of performing on stage with the breakup and yada yada yada. But it does not look good on a film. It does not look good on a big screen. It's just dizzying. Like, it was making me nauseous just how much this camera would spin, and then it would spin faster, and then spin faster. And then you have the flashing lights from the concert, and it was just too much. It was just too much. It was not good. I don't know why this was like the only thing they could think of to make the movie look interesting was to just make it spin as fast as it could. It was just completely unnecessary. So let's talk about Abel's character. He was uninteresting at best, and just a straight up dick at the worst. I don't know how much of the character that Abel is playing is supposed to represent him in real life. If this is an accurate representation of him in real life, he seems kind of insufferable. Like, he was just straight up just being a dick to everybody. And I don't know why, but I don't know why he was acting this way. Maybe just because he's just famous like that, but he was not likable or sympathetic at all. That's why I didn't care when he was crying for like half of the movie. Like, I just didn't care about him because he was just a dick. I don't know why we were supposed to feel sympathy for him. Just to get more into Abel's character and The Weeknd's acting, man, was it rough. Man, the previous time he acted was in the show he produced called The Idol, when he played Tedros, and I've only seen clips of it, and man, was it bad. So going into this movie, I wasn't expecting, like an Oscar-worthy performance, but man, was it bad. He cannot act to save his life. I'm sure you might have seen, maybe, there's this viral clip of a moment we'll get to later where he kind of blows up on Jenna Ortega's character. I mean, just the delivery of his lines and just the facial expressions and the acting on screen that he presents is just so one-dimensional. It's so flat. It feels like they were just rehearsing their lines. Just rehearsing. And then they somehow just decided to keep that into the final cut of the movie. It was kind of a baffling decision on the editor's part. Speaking of editing, this movie's editing was kind of trash as well. I feel like there's so many scenes where it's longer than like 2 minutes. There's so many one-take scenes that feel so unnecessarily long. I feel like even though this movie was only an hour 45 minutes, this movie should have been shorter than that. There's so much unnecessarily long scenes. There's scenes where like entire tracks of The Weeknd's music just plays. I mean, sometimes it's part of the scene, it's supposed to be, but even still, it was way too long. This movie felt way too long. So I get the meta-narrative that's supposed to be at play here with The Weeknd obviously playing The Weeknd, but the story that it's just trying to tell was just not interesting. It was just not interesting at all. I do not care about what The Weeknd was up to in this movie. The plot of the story, it feels so bare bones. I don't know why this movie exists. I read a comment somewhere, and I feel like this is super accurate. This movie felt like just an extended music video for his music. Like, it felt like just an advertisement for The Weeknd's music more than an actual movie. It was just a complete waste of time. I mean, the first half of this movie basically is two separate movies. So the first half, we have one story following The Weeknd and his breakup and his trauma, and on screen with the tour, and then losing his voice, which is supposed to parallel real life events, and I get it, and blah blah blah. We also have Jenna Ortega's character, who we see barely any of her in the first half. I mean, we only see her burning down somebody's house and then driving away, and we have no idea why. Again, really, it just felt completely pointless. And speaking more on Jenna Ortega, I feel bad for her as an actor because what she was given here to work with was just not good source material. I mean, she tried her best to work with what she had. I can feel her trying to actually be a good actor, trying her best, but it was just not enough to save this movie. Even though she was like the best part of this movie, technically, it just was not enough. Even her lines was just not good. It was not written well. And like I said, I felt her trying her hardest to just try to make this movie work, but it just didn't. I wrote one line here on this paper that perfectly describes the first half of this movie. It was disorganized at best and uninteresting at worst. Like I said, this movie is just a waste of time. It felt like we were just dilly-dallying. It felt like nothing was happening. I mean, things do start picking up once Abel and Jenna Ortega's character meet for the first time at the concert, and then they go backstage, and then they have this date after with after The Weeknd cancels his concert. Even then, that scene still felt really dry and really bare bones. And we have The Weeknd trying to act, but can't act to save his life, and Jenna Ortega trying with the best with what she had in her script. So Jenna Ortega's character is basically an obsessed fan, and we get more into that in a little bit later. For the first half, we just don't see what the point of her character is. This movie felt really up its own ass. I feel like that's the best way to describe it. It felt like it was sucking too much of its own farts. It felt like it just was high and mighty when it was like, a dwarf. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense, because this movie just felt like it was presenting itself as one thing, like this great genius idea, but the way it actually was presented just felt like nothing. Felt like nothing. And so then we get to the second half of this movie, and I get what the second half was supposed to be. It was supposed to be like The Weeknd and Jenna Ortega figuring out the reason why The Weeknd is feeling so guilty and anxious, and why everything feels so toxic. And I get the point of the movie during the second half, but again, just the way it was presented, it just really sucks. And so I'm gonna get into spoilers about like details about the second half, but I really don't feel like you need to go out of your way to watch this movie, so I'm just gonna talk about it anyways. So then we get to the hotel scene, and this is where I mean things kind of sort of start getting interesting, but not really. When we have Jenna Ortega trying to figure out why The Weeknd is feeling the way he is, and wanting him to speak the truth, but then he keeps like pushing her away. Then yada yada yada, and then we get that infamous scene where The Weeknd finally blows up on Jenna Ortega, where he was like, "Shut the fuck up!" Like, it was just the worst acting ever. And then so we get them where they're arguing, and then The Weeknd tries to leave, and then Jenna Ortega smashes a glass bottle on the back of his head. And then this is where we get into this dream sequence. And I wrote down here that this is probably one of the most shallow dream sequences I think I've seen in a movie, even though this is the most intriguing part of this movie, probably the most interesting part of this movie. Just as by itself, this scene, the dream sequence, was not interesting at all. I mean, there's a scene where he's like sent to like deep down in this catacombs, and you're just walking down this long dark hallway, and then you see this girl crouching, and then she just jumps up, and then it's supposed to be like suspenseful and kind of scary, and it just felt so uninteresting. Like, I just didn't care. The way it presents it, it just was not interesting. This movie was boring. I don't get why this movie was made. I don't see the point in this existing. So then Jenna Ortega's character ties him up to the bed, and then she plays him some of his music, like Blinding Lights, and then some music off Dawn FM. Like I said, I feel like Jenna Ortega was trying her best to work with what she had to work with here. I mean, she was like with the dancing, and then she was like explaining the music back to him. Even though Jenna Ortega was trying her hardest, and she was probably a lot more interesting to watch, the scenes here just took way too long. These scenes took way too long. It was just too much. I don't know why we had to listen to the whole track for us to get the message as an audience member. And then we get the fight between Jenna Ortega and the Weeknd's manager when he breaks into the hotel room. And then they have this really awkward scuffle with like them just kind of wrestling with the furniture. And then it ends with Jenna Ortega stabbing him in the neck with some glass that he broke. And then we cut to the Weeknd looking back as we see Jenna Ortega crying with, the dead body. Jenna Ortega pours the gasoline onto the Weeknd, the same gasoline that we saw her pouring in the beginning of the movie. And so the Weeknd is supposed to finally accept his fate. And then he starts singing this song, which goes on for way too long. It's like 4 minutes of him singing. I mean, even though like his singing technically is not bad, like I said, I don't mind him singing. As a movie, this scene goes on for way too long. We did not need to hear this whole segment. Like I said, this movie felt way too artsy and way too up its own ass for it to be doing this. Just why? And then we get the ending where after he's done singing, Jenna Ortega's character was moved so much that she unties him, and then we have her lighting the room on fire, and then the Weeknd leaves the hotel room. And once the bed sets on fire, we don't see Jenna Ortega at all for the rest of the movie. So she could have been in there dying and like lighting herself up on fire, or she could have left with the Weeknd. We have no idea because she just straight up disappears after the bed goes up in flames. It's supposed to be to this open to interpretation sort of scene where you kind of decide, oh, did she or did she not? But honestly, who cares? Who gives a fuck? Like, this movie was just so uninteresting. I don't really care. Like, why are we doing this? And then the final shot of the movie is supposed to mirror the opening shot of this movie, where the Weeknd is staring at the mirror before he performs at his concert. Which I didn't even talk about. The opening scene of this movie is also just really weird. It's just him 2 minutes of like just going at a mirror. It was just really goofy. I mean, what was going on? Like, I think it's supposed to be him like preparing his vocals, but it was just really goofy. I feel like we could have gone without that. Just going, it was just super dumb. But yeah, so the ending scene, the final shot, is supposed to mirror the opening shot, which actually I think is supposed to represent the album too, because I think in the album Hurry Up Tomorrow, the final track fades into the first track of his very first album. It's supposed to be this sort of loop thing, but I don't care. Like I said, I wrote down on this paper right here that it just felt like an empty metaphor for spiraling in circles. Like, just okay. So so that's the end of this movie, and like I said, this movie was just an hour 45 minutes of nothing. This movie was just a waste of time. I wrote down here, I think my biggest problem with this movie is just that it just felt too unrelatable. Like with art and with movies and films and TV, I want to feel something. I want to feel at least sort of semi-relatable. I want to feel something towards the main character, but I don't care because the Weeknd's character is just super unrelatable. I mean, he's a superstar. He has this world tour. He's going on tour. He has the infinite money. He has infinite wealth. He has the ability to get with whoever he wants. I mean, none of that is just relatable. Except the last part. I am okay. But like I said, it's not relatable because I'm not a superstar. I'm not wealthy. I'm not a big dick to everybody I talk to. I just was not. That's why I didn't feel any sort of sympathy. So I didn't care what he was going through in this movie. I guess if that makes sense. I don't think there's too much to offer here because it was just pretty much a big advertisement for the Weeknd's new album. If you're a Weeknd fan, even I'm not sure if you're gonna get anything out of this movie. Maybe this is like the perfect Weeknd experience that you were looking for. As a fan of movies, this is just not worth your time or your money, and I would advise anybody really to just avoid this movie at all costs. It's just not worth your time. As a theatrical experience and as a film, it was about as interesting as watching paint dry. And so for that reason, I'm just going to give this movie like a 30 out of 100. It was not worth my time. And frankly, I don't even think it's worth your time to have watched this review for this long. But thank you for sticking around for this long if you have. Okay, so but yeah, those are my thoughts on Hurry Up Tomorrow. Let me know about what you thought about this movie, if for some reason you decided to watch this movie. And leave a comment down below about what you thought about my review, or maybe what I should talk about next. If you have something interesting to suggest, let me know, and I'll try my best to review it. And thank you so much for watching.